Alex Steele, speaking with Baker Hughes CEO Lorenzo Simonelli at CERAWeek. That is where all the energy honchos globally get together in Houston. It's their big conference every year. Looking at WTI crude oil, it's off 50 cents here today, sitting right there, $66.50 per barrel. Let's get to Washington, D.C., get the latest on what's happening there. Almost our daily check-in with Nathan Dean, because he's the senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence based down there in Houston. Nathan, let's sidestep tariffs for the moment. Let's talk about keeping this government open. Can you give us a guideline? Where are we and what do we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so over the weekend, we saw House Speaker Mike Johnson and the House Republicans release a 99-page bill. It is a 6-month continuing resolution that would keep the government open until September 30th. There's a little bit of policy writers in this bill. You know, there's a lot of talk about a clean CR, aka just keep the funding going. This is a cleanish CR. There's additional funding in here for immigration and for defense, but a lot of the more policy writers that Republican or Democrats had feared would be in there isn't in there. Now, the challenge is that Speaker Johnson wants to have a vote tomorrow night, Tuesday night. He can only afford to lose one. And I wouldn't be surprised if this bill doesn't move forward just because that's a quick time frame to try and get the entire Republican caucus on board. Now, if this bill doesn't move forward, I look for the Senate to then just call for a 1-month extension, and we'll have this interview sometime next month. If the bill does go forward, well, then it's up to the Senate Democrats, because remember, this isn't going through reconciliation. You need to have 8, most likely 7 or 8 Democrats to go with this to overcome a filibuster. And this is the challenge of, will we get a shutdown or will we not? I don't think we'll get a shutdown. I don't really think there's much appetite for shutdowns on either party at the moment. So either they'll get a deal done, or I think more likely they'll kick the can 1 month, and we'll talk about this in April.
Seems like most Democrats and Republicans alike have various concerns about the bill. Can you touch on the main points of one party and the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So, on the Republican side, obviously this is a clean-ish bill, which doesn't really give them exactly all they want. I mean, there's additional, the Republicans want lot more funds for the Department of Defense. They want a lot more funds for immigration. This is just a small subset of that. On the Democratic side, well, look, you're not going to be voting for something that actually increases the budget for immigration and for deportation strategies. So the Democrats in particular aren't really, want to go along with regardless. There's a lot of anger on the Democratic Party in terms of DOGE at the moment. And, there is some language in here that gives additional flexibility to the White House in terms of spending, not to the point where it would be controversial, I think, but enough that the Democrats won't want to get on board. So, but, again, the idea here is that shutdowns usually occur when both parties feel that their position is politically advantageous. And I'm just not getting the sense from the Republicans or the Democrats at the moment. If there is a shutdown, remember, the Republican agenda in the House essentially gets delayed until the government reopens. A lot of President Trump's agenda will be delayed. And the Democrats historically have viewed shutdowns as bad for politics. So I think for those folks who want to see if they can go visit the pandas at the zoo this weekend, chances are you're going to be able to do so.
All right. But if there were a shutdown, would the blame go on the Republicans since they control both chambers?
It depends. I mean, obviously, if a shutdown occurs, and look, maybe Congress comes up with a deal and President Trump at the last moment says, no, I don't want to sign this, therefore there's a shutdown, then I think the Republicans would get some of the blame. If it's a clean-ish CR and the question is, are you going to pass this or are you going to shut the government down, the Democrats could potentially get a blame. But here it is. We're in March of 2025 and the election isn't until November of 2026. So even though there could be a political price to pay, there's so much time on the going forward that I'm not sure either party is really going to pay that much of a political price. So, we'll see what happens. But again, I'm not exactly sure that now's the time for a shutdown. I think that threat for a shutdown could come later this year or the beginning of next year when both parties shore up their positions.
How much of the anxiety over this shutdown could bleed into the debt ceiling debate, which will take place likely in the summer?
That's a great question because, from the market impact, government shutdowns really don't have all that much impact. If you go back to the 35-day shutdown that occurred under the Trump administration, the first one, you saw the markets dip and then subsequently rose above to where they even began the shutdown. But there's a lot of angst, though, when it comes to shutdowns, because can this bleed into the debt ceiling debate that's going to come probably in June or July? And the answer is obviously, because if government can't pass a funding bill, how are they going to pass something like the debt ceiling? Now, we have an 80% chance the debt ceiling debate is resolved. We don't think either party wants to see a debt ceiling crisis take place this summer, but you still have to ask the question, because the way this works is there's a lot of negative headlines, a lot of headline risk that leads up to a solution. Then the solution breaks down. Again, a lot of negative headlines, but ultimately a resolution. And I think a lot of the angst with shutdowns bleeds into this debt ceiling debate that we're going to see this summer.
Nathan, thank you so much. Always appreciate getting a few minutes of your time as we try to figure out what's going on down in Washington, D.C. Lots happening on a daily basis. Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's down there in Washington, D.C., and such value to our Bloomberg clients to figure out what's going on in D.C. and how it impacts their investments.